Welcome everyone to the Thompson Free Library Story Slam. My name is Bobby Keniston, and once more, I'll be kind of hosting, being a bit of an MC to guide us through this time. Although, as you all know, those of you who've been here before know that really this is all about you. It's all about us. It's all about the community sharing and telling stories. And tonight's theme is hindsight. We thought that was a clever idea. Hindsight, of course, 2020 is now in the past, in the rearview mirror, as we drive forward into 2021, and a group of days that are dates that are palindromes, which is cool. So, obviously, I think we can all say, no matter, this is in no way any kind of partisan comment, because I think we all agree that this has been a strange, interesting, transitional, testing time for all of us. As I said, when we first started doing this via Zoom, it's become sort of a whole new culture in just a very short amount of time, and a whole new reality that we're still adjusting to and moving forward with. And I'm looking forward to the times when this will all be kind of hindsight and be able to listen to the stories we've told during this time. And that's why I think it's so vital that we're still doing this, to keep this kind of record of a time unlike any other in so many years. This is definitely, as they say, we're living history right now. But I won't go on such a huge spiel like that, and instead just again welcome you all here. I'm happy to see everyone who's joined us, and I'd actually like to start. As you all know, the library has gone through its own set of changes in the last weeks or so. And as with all things, transitions, um, there's it's often hard to say goodbye, but it's also very wonderful to say hello. And so we've had that opportunity. And I would first like to say, for me personally, how grateful I have been over these last few years with Greta running the library. She's become a great friend, but not only that, a great supporter of me personally, but also like the work that I would do with the theater. I also, before COVID, wrote 2.5 plays in the library. It became like my office for a while, and it became just sort of an everyday thing to speak to Michelle and Greta about the progress of my writing and things like that. And I know she put her heart into a lot of the programs, and just was a great boon to our community. So I'm sure you all would agree. Give Greta a nice round of applause and thank you for her wonderful work. And I don't want to embarrass her, so I'll move along quickly. There's the kind of not goodbye, but a kind of we'll see you. We'll of course still see Greta. Um, but now moving into the hello. I'm sure many of you have already met him, but stepping in, and I've already talked his ear off several times when I visited the library, and that is John Knepp. I did pronounce
Hi
that
everyone.
correctly, right?
Yeah. John, it's pronounced John. If you
Oh,
didn't,
good.
yeah. Yeah. So I just thank Bobby for doing this. Of course, I'm completely new to it, so I'm glad that I don't have to 100% lead the whole thing. That's kind of nice. And welcome to all of you. I've met some of you, most of you. I probably met some of you with a mask on and don't recognize you without a mask. It's a weird kind of face blindness that I'm new to because don't know what anyone looks like without the mask unless I've been in Zooms with them enough. So it's kind of a weird situation that only happens in the last year. So welcome and thank you all for coming. Thanks, Bobby, for doing this. Thank Greta for everything. I know she doesn't like to be embarrassed by doting on her, but she has really done a great job. She's helped me out a whole lot. And we appreciate everything she's done. So
Awesome. Indeed. It's been
okay, Bobby, back to you.
Oh, sorry. It's been a joy getting to know you, John, and I look forward to continuing to get to know you. And when things I promise.
I didn't know if you were muted, but
oh.
I think, John, you're having connectivity issues, maybe.
Oh, I am?
Oh, I hear you now.
You're back now, though.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nice.
Yeah, it was kind of going in and out or something. I don't know what was going on, but it's strange.
I'm sorry. I was just saying how it's been a joy getting to know you, and I look forward to working with you on all kinds of different events. And I look forward to you being able to see the library when it's not under COVID restrictions too.
Yeah, that's what everyone's been telling me. It's like, oh, this is great. These things are great. It's not in the middle of a pandemic. And I'm like, yeah, I can see that, and look forward to it all getting back to some new kind of normal that we can have events at. So
definitely. Oh, hi, Peter.
Hello, how is everyone?
Good.
Oh, Peter. Hi, Peter.
Hello. How are you, Louise? Haven't seen you for a long time.
No.
I saw Greta's face a second ago.
Mm.
Hi.
Hey, Peter. Nice to see
Greta.
you.
How are you doing?
Good.
It's good to see you. It's good to see you all. I guess I'll get the ball rolling as I generally do. Just a few quick announcements. Well, actually, just one that I just learned about that I'm excited about. And this is about a group called Chewonki with their owls. And it's going to be like a virtual owl event with the Thompson Free Library, February 17th at 11 a.m. And now with that announcement, I would like to remind everyone with the Story Slam, when people are telling their stories, if you would mute yourselves so there's no kind of interference with the speaker. And in between each story, I'll say a few words. And please feel free. I know it's always hard, but you can either use the kind of Zoom icon to raise your hand if you would like to tell a story next, or you could even send it in a chat, or you could jump right in. I will give people a chance to do that between each story, to just jump right in. Also, a reminder that this is being recorded. And great. Okay, I think that's about it. And so I'll get the ball rolling as I tend to do. And so Hindsight. We were all very excited about this theme when we started talking about it. We had a meeting about this story slam, and we got very philosophical about the idea of what hindsight could mean and how versatile of a theme it can be. And of course, a lot of folks, then when they think of hindsight, that old expression, of course, hindsight's 2020, which suggests with new information, if I had known this information then, perhaps I could have saved myself some headache or pain or trauma or anything like that. It's often set up in that kind of narrative. And since I'm hosting this, I always try to think a little bit outside of perhaps the common narrative. And so I'm going to tell a quick little story. I think a lot of us, not to presume to speak for everyone, but I think a lot of us, when we start thinking about the past, often think about old relationships. And I don't, of course, just mean romantic relationships, but friendships, family relationships, and so forth. But this last week, I've been thinking actually about old relationships, and so I'd like to tell a quick story. I once was dating a young woman, and she had a son, and he was just an infant, freshly turned 2. And so when you're dating someone who has a child, obviously it's of importance. You want to get along well with the child too, of course. And so as I became a bigger part of this young woman's life, I became a bigger part of her son's life as well. And of course, in the early days, it would be, "You're taking attention away from my mom. I don't, um, I don't like that." But of course, as time goes on, and me being a big kid myself, enjoying playing with the young man, reading him stories, doing silly voices and all of that. Whenever I would go to the apartment, it got to a point where before she could even kiss me hello, he'd be running up to me, grabbing my hand and leading me into his playroom, as though, "Oh, he's here to see me. Sorry, Mom." And that was, of course, a great feeling. And but the main thrust of this story is a certain event. The young woman in question, she had, interestingly, a little bit of psoriasis on her elbow. And the only reason I bring this up is because her son really liked the texture of her elbow and would always want to play with it and touch it or pinch it or whatnot. And what started as just wanting to touch the kind of different elbow became a comfort. It became something like if he were upset, he would wrap his arms around her arm and with his fingers kind of touch her elbow, and it became a comfort. And his other hand would be in his mouth as he was wrapped around, or sucking his thumb and feeling her elbow. And I bring this up because for one, I find it interesting, those things that become comfort. But anyhow, one day I was helping out his mother, who had to do some laundry, and she was literally doing laundry just a few doors down. And I asked if she wanted me to go get her laundry out of the dryer, and she said, "No, you can just stay with him." And so I stayed with the little man, and of course, whenever Mom was out of sight, it was usually a cause for "What's going on?" And so she walked out, and he looked at me, and he, looked kind of upset. And I picked him up, and I stood him on the couch, which he liked. And I was kind of holding him there as he was on the couch. And I was like, "Don't worry, Mama will be back in just a few minutes." And he kind of repeated in a sad little, "Oh, Mama will be back in a few minutes." I said, "Yeah, Mama will be. She's just right down. She'll be right back with the laundry." And he, at that moment, he wrapped his arms around my arm here and started playing with my elbow and then sucking his thumb with the other arm. And at that moment, I felt this kind of, well, just a profound feeling. I haven't been blessed to have children myself, and which is something that it's sometimes hard to reconcile. I'd always imagined being a father by this time in my life. But I guess the profound moment was just the idea that I had become this, not just the fixture, this visiting fixture, but someone, because he only did this with his mother and his grandmother and no one else. And then the fact that I became another person that he trusted enough to seek kind of comfort from and to be there in his life was a profound feeling for me. And I often think that if anyone were to ask me what was one of the best moments of my life, I would honestly say that was one of them. And um, without question, really. But the only reason I bring this up, so as things often do, time passed and the relationship ended, and it was an amicable breakup, and I have nothing but fond thoughts of both of the young woman and her son still, and hope that it's the same both ways, because it was just one of those relationships that stopped. There was nothing acrimonious or angry or anything like that. Um, and and so what's interesting, but of course, despite the fact that it was a friendly breakup and still with fond feelings, obviously there's pain and with any breakup. And what was harder was a pain that because of course you know the her son didn't break up with me, but in effect I stopped being a part of her son's life. And and so that was a whole different kind of mourning and a different kind of pain, and something that I still think about from time to time, this sort of feeling of lack of these paternal instincts that I had grown for this young fellow in the time that I was with his mother. Now, to bring this into the reference of hindsight and how this is different from, and how I hope this is a different kind of spin on the hindsight story, is this. Pain is hard. Pain is especially like, you know, losing one, and you know, there's often a mourning process and things like that. And I think human nature would be to skip pain as well as you know, as well as you can. And part of me could say, you know, with this hindsight now that I have, I could say, you know, maybe in the future, maybe it's too hard to date someone with kids if I get too attached to their child or things like that. But on the other hand, as I just mentioned, that one moment was honestly one of the great moments of my life, to have this little guy um, look to me as this source of comfort. And so one might be reminded of the Garth Brooks song, The Dance. Or often in life, with the knowledge you have, you could have skipped pain along the way, but you also, in doing so, could miss a lot of wonderful moments. Now, this, of course, is not apropos for every situation at all, but that's the story I wanted to share. That even with the knowledge I have now, sometimes it's better not to know at the time, because else you could really miss out on some pretty profound, life-changing experiences. And with that, I think my minutes are up. And thank you all for listening to my not quite family story. And I open the floor up to who, if there's someone who would like to speak, again, feel free to unmute yourself and just say, I'd like to tell a story or anything like that. It's a very open and friendly environment here. We're all pals. So, is there anyone who'd like to speak? Because I know my story was worth the price of admission, but still,
We have one.
definitely. Oh, Marilee, hi. Hi, Marilee and Bruce.
I think she's muted.
Sure. Oh, do you have your volume up or with your? If you'd like to, you could tell the story in interpretive dance as well. That is always.
All right, they're gonna fix their
Okay.
problem so someone else can go.
Yeah, if someone wants to see if they can.
All right, I'll tell one.
Oh, awesome. Thank you.
I don't really have one planned, so here we go. I'll just wing it, I guess. All right, so a hindsight story. I really wasn't going to speak tonight. Okay. All right, let's do. I've got one. I've got a good one. So, 20-year-old Michelle really enjoyed drinking in college a lot, and all of my friends did. And I met a guy named Ben Fagan, and we were friends and dated, and we went to a something at UMO called Bumstock, and it's a great party, and lots of concerts and a lot of fun. And I drank a lot and was not careful and ended up pregnant. And so I guess my hindsight story is this. So I got pregnant. Whoops. And didn't know. And for, I guess it was about 6 weeks before I figured out that I was pregnant. And but it was funny because my body and my brain kind of knew that I was pregnant, but like I didn't realize I was pregnant. And so like I quit smoking and I quit drinking and like all these things that I had been doing just like matter of factly. Like my friends were like ready to go party and I was like, I think I'll be designated driver, which was not normal at all, but it just was how it happened. And so I went home. College, that year of college ended, and I went home. And Ben and I were still like hanging out. I'd go to Bangor and hang out, and vice versa. He'd come to the island or whatever. But I had been home for maybe 3 weeks, and then realized that I hadn't had my period and things were not normal. So I took 8 pregnancy tests because I wasn't quite sure the first 7 worked. That last one was the one that answered the question for me. And so I told my mom, and my mom and I like both decided like that like abortion wasn't an option for me. It was, but it wasn't one that I had really considered. I wouldn't, just wasn't something that I could do. No judgment to people who do, because I think it's everybody's right to choose, but it wasn't a choice that I wanted to make. And so my mom and I had a discussion about being a mom. And so I hadn't seen Ben in a couple of weeks, and I didn't want to tell him over the phone, super impersonal. So I waited until I was going to see him again. And I went to his apartment one day after he got out of work, and I told him what had happened, and it was dead silent in the room that we were in. Like you could hear a pin drop. It was so quiet. And the first thing that he said to me was, if it's a boy, can we name him Pierce? And I was like, yeah, sure. Like that's, thankful that he was kind of on board and that he was okay. And so life kind of spun really fast for a while, and I'm short. And so I immediately started showing before I was even 3 months pregnant. I was showing. And in fact, I was showing so much by the end of my 3 months that they thought I was having twins. There's just one little baby in there, but they thought I was just really big. And so all this stuff was going on, and we're getting married in like, I had only been dating this guy for such a short amount of time, and my whole world is changing, and am I doing the right thing? And so we'll fast forward to get married. We have Pierce. Pierce comes early. He comes at just shy of 2 months early. He's 7.5 weeks early. And so that adds some complications to a brand new marriage, and things are crazy. And we're married for 3 years. And then we decide it's time for a divorce because life was crazy and we were really young, and we shouldn't have gotten married just because we were having a baby, and life was kind of crazy. But my hindsight to this is actually a good spin, and it is, I would not change any of it. I had a lot of hardship. I had a lot of sadness. My son is my greatest accomplishment so far. He's an amazing kid. He's almost out of high school, which boggles my mind all the time. And I also still have my best friend, who is the man that I divorced. I love his family. I love him. I can't imagine my life without him. I just can't imagine being married to him. So my hindsight is I'm thankful for every little twist and turn that took in my life. But hindsight is I wouldn't change it for the world. And that's my story.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Michelle. First of all, I'm glad that you shared a story, and for me, what I especially like hearing, similarly in theme, is the idea of, even with the hindsight, still not wanting to change a thing about that scenario. It, of course, it's funny because my mind keeps racing now with pop culture about hindsight and songs and things like that. And I was just thinking of the Alanis Morissette song, "You Live, You Learn," and so on. And so what a wonderful idea about the variables of love as well. That marriage isn't the only expression of a lifetime partnership. It's one, and it's obviously a good one if it works. But certainly, I like hearing a tale as yours, where you still can't imagine a life without your ex, because I think that's how I think that should be the healthy alternative if people can swing it. So that's awesome. Thank you very much. I don't know, Marilee and Bruce, did you manage to get your, oh, I see 2 screens. Hi.
Okay. Oh, no. No.
Well, I don't mind a little reverb. But,
Sorry, I have to unmute. Turn down the volume on the one with the picture, that where we can see Bruce, and then you should be okay.
Oh, that's good. Thank you, Michelle.
You're brilliant. Yay.
I've been doing Zoom way
Nice.
too long.
Oh man, thank God. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank
Okay. All right. Let's see. Just gonna make it. Sorry, guys. This is technical difficulty city over here. All right. So you can hear me. Okay. Excellent. So this story has a little similar flavor but different. I don't think I wouldn't understand the words this woman was telling me for weeks and weeks and weeks and several state lines. But what this woman was saying, I found myself sitting in Quartzsite, Arizona at a gem and mineral show. And it was a little after lunchtime and we were drinking whiskey. And her name was Kelly Lee, and her mother's name was Marilee. And she was right in the middle of telling me about a concept she had called the brain pan, which is her way of thinking about how our minds are permeable in the collective sphere, right? And so we were having this discussion, and she was also teaching me how to wire wrap, and she was showing me how to make these very specific wire wraps because it seemed like the thing you do when you're at the Gem and Mineral show. Everybody's, you're going to be a wire wrapper, right? So here we were wire wrapping, and proceeded to talk about a great many things. And she said, you should come to South America with my puppy and my other dog and my other dog and this other dog. And, laughing, joking, thinking about it. And she said, but what you really need to do is find marbles, the playing marbles, so you can work on your spherical wrapping. It's a good lesson for you. And I said, all right, well, marbles, where am I going to find marbles at a gem and mineral show? I mean, I suppose I could. So I hunted around and couldn't find any. And at any of the vendors, none of them had them. And I still couldn't find any marbles. And I still didn't really understand what she was talking about the brain pan. And even when we got to the Ehrenberg-Brawley area, which is right on the border of Arizona and California, I think. And, what happened there was that we were flying a sign because that's how my friends and I were traveling. I had run out of money. That's a whole other story, whole other story. And, still couldn't find any marbles when we were flying signs outside of a Walmart. Still couldn't find any marbles when we got in trouble because there was a homeless man that was very upset that we were at his corner. And we said, we're so sorry. And we had this very tumultuous exchange with this man. And we were really hoping that we would just be there for a day so that we could go back to Quartzsite and get back to the Gem and Mineral show. And long story short, in this area was that my friend's lover's dog ended up getting very protective of this man that was houseless, that wanted to be on his corner. And so the dog, Yogi, lunged at said homeless man, knocked him to the ground, and no marbles fell out of his pockets. I still couldn't find my marbles. This man was on the ground, and turns out, and it was because he had threatened to tie us to a stake and light it on fire like they do at the rainbow gatherings. And so the dog attacks the man. The animal control is called. The dog is taken away to El Centro, California, in the southern part of California, for 2 weeks. And so there we were, having to travel around without one less of our party there. And finally the day comes where it's time for us to go get Yogi dog. Go get the dog. It's been 2 weeks. He could come out of quarantine. And so in that 2 weeks, I hadn't seen Kelly Lee. She was somewhere, disappeared. I hadn't found the marbles, and we still had to go pick up this dog in Southern California. And so we managed to make our way there. However, we just managed to make our way there, and we showed up bright and early. My friend's lover wanted to get there right when they opened. So of course we ended up getting there 20 minutes before they actually opened. And so there we were in this dusty barrios, beautiful landscape, really this kind of dusty area. And it was the Humane Society. And there were these cats. There were hundreds of cats outside of the entryway. And there were hundreds more once we finally got in. I mean, I am a cat person, and there were many beautiful cats, crooked faced cats, cats without tails, stumpy foot cats, just so many beautiful cats. And so I was having the time of my life while Yogi and my friend's lover were reuniting. And at the time, still hadn't found marbles, and I wasn't really concerned about it because I was just hanging out with cats, and I had the bright idea of maybe one of these cats would want to live with me and travel with me. Why wouldn't a cat want to do that, right? Well, so tried with one cat, it was a beautiful white cat, tried to lay down with it in my car and immediately freaked out, almost scratched my face. I said, well, that's all right. So I kind of shuffled around, hung out with the dog. Another cat came up, and this beautiful long-haired cat, and I thought, well, maybe this cat will want to travel with me. So I try and pick it up, and it immediately flails all of its limbs and runs away. And so I'm like, well, obviously I shouldn't be traveling with a cat, in California, until out of the corner of my eye comes this really sick-looking, scrawny orange cat that kind of walked up to me, and I said, well, he's weird and cute, maybe he'll come with me. And I picked him up, and he immediately started purring, and I laid down in the back of my car. I had my sleeping bag all laid out from the day before, so I just laid down, and immediately he starts headbutting me and purring, and he's kneading, and I said, well, this dude's pretty cool, I'll just go inquire what the deal is with this cat. And finding marbles to work on wire wrapping was definitely incredibly far from my mind, but I went in to the Humane Society, and I said, this cat's really cool. What happens? Can I adopt him? Is he, he seems really cool. And they said, oh, that cat, that's the manager's favorite. That cat's name is Marbles. And so little did I know, I found my marbles, and little would I know happening after that day was that every time he would decide to gallivant and go on an adventure, whether it was Denver or Ohio or in the desert or by the ocean, I would always lose my marbles, but then he would come back. That's my story.
Oh, very nice.
And Marilyn,
Very nice.
is Marbles right there behind you?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh my goodness. So that's a very happy ending. Oh, I got to tell you, Marilee, I hope that, I don't know, you're probably busy these days, but sometime you should write a book of your memoirs. I always enjoy so much listening to your stories and the details, and it's always very vivid and so well described. So think about it, you could have a book club. And,
Yes, actually, I really like that idea. We will talk. Yes.
nice. Awesome. Well, thank you. All right. Is there anyone else who'd be interested in sharing a story about hindsight in their lives, whatever that means to you? There's no, I won't, I promise, stop anyone and say, well, that's not the hindsight we're looking for. Come on, get with the program.
Bob, can you see me?
Sounds like Bruce wants to say
Oh,
something.
hi. Hey, Bruce.
Hey, folks. Can you hear me all right?
I can.
Okay. Hindsight. I would like to start with the poster and Michelle's photograph of the rear view mirror. And I would ask you folks, if possible, sitting here around a stove or heater or here in central rural Maine, to imagine what it might have been like to be a 20-year-old young person taking a Porsche, not the Spider, but it was the one that Volkswagen and Porsche made after the Second World War. It was called the Bathtub. About 80 miles an hour, 85, pushing 90. Dawn was just coming up from the east, and in the rearview mirror, the lights of San Francisco are becoming less and less bright. The thrust of that speed and youth passed by all of the Red Rock country in Arizona, missed completely whatever Barstow and Southern California had to offer, passed through the Malapai in west central New Mexico, and by that time it was beginning to be dark. I knew I wasn't going to get to the destination where I had hoped to be. That evening, ended up in a hotel, one of these, what I now learned were adobe homes, buildings, rented a room. The bed was still warm from a previous occupant.
Oh.
The road was dirt. None of this really sank in. The next morning, driving up north toward Denver, the landscape was a blur. There are mesas and mountains, snow-capped peaks. There are vast expanses. The clouds and the sky are what one would see when we went up north into the county, only drier. None of that apparently registered. But in hindsight, whatever the magic that people talk about, the land of enchantment in New Mexico, it worked a spell on me so that many years later, having spent a lot of time in art school, I ended up back in New Mexico again. Art school, we drew models, we drew still lives, we drew from plaster casts in the museum. And I graduated supposedly knowing how to draw. Not until I was asked, what is a building, an experimental structure that no one had seen before, using sun, trying adobe, melding traditional building materials with cast off salvage materials. What is it going to look like? And I realized none of my training had prepared me to be able to listen to you, to hear what you're saying, and to reflect that back in a visual form in a way that you could say, oh, you know, that's almost what I had in mind. Not until even more years passed and a friend sent a letter asking, how do you get your hand to cooperate? Did it dawn on me that drawing is not about me and you as an object, even if the object happens to be a concept, but it's a relationship that is created between two entities that somehow need to resonate before a communion is established, and the pencil marks or the marker marks that one would make, or the drawings in the sand even are simply traces of what one eye is caressing in another's being. And I would not have known that if I had stayed on the West Coast, a traveling fellowship headed for Japan. Rather, I turned around, I faced east and drove to New Mexico, and that has changed. And I realized that this is for all of us. We take a path and the other one cannot be taken. But it is what has allowed me to work as the cooperative hand to help other people see what they may have difficulty expressing. I bring that up partly because in hindsight, had I gone to Japan, I might have built on the art school's philosophy of helping students become artists. I didn't follow that path. And hindsight now, as I move past 80, is that there are things that an artist touches in their own hearts that I have not yet touched. And there's this fine line, Marilee knows pretty well, that between being of service and helping other people and the fact that life offers such a vast expanse of ever-changing beauty. How can I possibly reach out and embrace it all instead of having to make do with these few marks that are just approximations of the incredible wonder that we are given in this life to explore? Thank you, folks.
Thank you for sharing that
Mm,
vision.
that was
Thank you,
absolutely
Bruce.
beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Thank you very much. It was took me on a journey in my own mind's eye there, and yes, just lovely. It's rare that I feel sort of rendered. I mean, what is there to add to what you just said? It's quite lovely. Thank you so much. I'm still seeing the lights in the rear view mirror as they fade. Okay, very nice. Wouldn't it be something if we could just embrace it all? All right. Is there anyone else who would like to share? I mean, we're coming close. It's about 10 to the hour, but we definitely have time for another story or so if people would like to.
Well, then I think,
Could I add an addendum to that without interfering with anyone else?
Oh, certainly.
At that same time that I received the letter asking, how do you get a hand to cooperate when it's drawing? The book by Robert Heinlein was making its passage through hippiedom and communes and a variety of dropouts. But the one thing in that book, Stranger in a Strange Land, that stuck with me so long is the word called grok. It's a term that I'm sure he made up, or well, I speak without knowledge on that, but in essence, it reflected the Japanese approach that if a painter is going to paint bamboo, he becomes that bamboo. And that was the essence of the connection that I was endeavoring to articulate in words earlier. I don't know if we're here. Anyone else? I see Leslie nodding her head as though she is familiar with that particular story. But,
Oh, yeah.
okay, yeah, that's it. It just, in a way, it gave me what I might have received had I gone ahead and gone to Japan, but without the interaction of helping other people see. I might have done my best to learn how to use the brushes and the paint and the ink stick, and would be drawing entirely differently than I do now. But that simply is hindsight. Coming back to what Michelle said, no regrets. We're where we are.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, if nobody else wants to step in, I'll offer one.
Definitely. Thank you.
As many of you know, many of my stories are stories about my medical career. And the reason is because I wanted to be a doctor from the time I was 9. So my medical life started very early, and it has become who I am. And the story I'm going to tell you is a very quick run through that to where I am now. I went directly, I was a straight arrow. So, I did high school. I knew I was going to go to college. I picked a college that was associated with a medical school so that I would be able to get into medical school. And I looked at all the medical schools and I said, this particular medical school, Tufts, has a community medicine program. So I'm going to go to Tufts undergraduate so I can get into Tufts Medical School so that I can go into community medicine. And that started very early. So my trajectory was straight. And I did all that and went through my residency in New York. I left Boston thinking it was time for me to go to a bigger city. I met my husband, my future husband. I did my residency in New York in a very high-powered community hospital in New York, in Manhattan. And during those years, one of the things about becoming a doctor in those days, I think it's a little different now, actually. But in those days, the idea was to train you by trial by fire. It was grueling, and it was meant to be grueling. So you were on call every other night or every third night, sometimes depending on whatever you were doing. And you were tired all the time. You hardly had any time to do anything. It was great. David and I were able to save a lot of money because we didn't have time to spend any money. And so the $17,000 a year that I earned was like a fortune. Because, all our expenses were otherwise very minimal. Then I decided after my residency that we really wanted to be in a rural area. So we came directly to Maine, and I've told you that story before and I won't repeat it. But when we got here, the idea was we were going to set up our office and we were going to dig right in and start seeing patients. And I was really excited. After all those years of studying and all those years of preparing, I was ready to dig in and be a doctor. We had interviewed and we liked the place. We were welcomed by the administration and by people in the community. We were wined and dined to get us to come here. And so it all seemed like it was sort of heavenly. And they even agreed to give us an office space free for a year. So we didn't have to pay rent for a year, no salary. They didn't do that then. So we had free rent for a year and we could hang out our shingle and we'd make whatever we made. So I did that. I got going with a very good practice. I'm an internist, and most of the other doctors in the community were family physicians, family practitioners. So I was a specialist in this community, which initially people didn't know what to do with. And you know, I won't go into the story about being a woman and being a consultant to the men on the staff, who some of whom were not so sure they trusted a woman doctor. But we got over that, and I ended up with a really active, good practice of internal medicine type patients who tended to be sicker with more problems, more health concerns, more frequent hospitalizations. And often they were people who ended up in the intensive care unit. And I ran the intensive care unit, and I had people on ventilators, and I did dialysis, which I never should have done, but anyway, I did. I had some experience with it. And I started a substance abuse treatment program, and I started a hospice, and I ran the ICU, and I did all this stuff. And while I was doing that, I was getting married and having children and running a house and trying to be home in time for dinner. And I was still on call either every third night or every other night, depending on the other practitioners in the region. Didn't have really much coverage. And so I loved what I did. And I've had a really fabulous career because I had a lot of variety. I ran the oncology clinic, you know, everything I've done, I have loved. And I always said to me when people said, oh, aren't you exhausted, or isn't it too much? Or I'd say, no, I really love what I'm doing. I also love my family. My children have been a great blessing and joy. And so fast forward, I now have 3 children and a new granddaughter in the last year. She's just coming up on her year anniversary, her year birthday. And I'm, in hindsight, I'm realizing that at almost 70, I might have done it differently. And it has been a real gift to me to have the opportunity to review how I lived my life, which I have no regrets about. I loved my life. And I always said, I am never going to live with regrets. So the decisions I made were decisions that I chose. But the truth is, I am now realizing that those early years in my life, I lived completely mindlessly. I planned, and they were very strategic, but I was mindless in the sense that I didn't inquire, could I be happy doing something else? Or could I be happy doing it differently? Could I be happy practicing medicine in a multi-specialty group practice in a city where I would have coverage and I only had to work every 5th night or every 6th night instead of every other night? And I look back on that and I remember how many times I didn't get home for dinner, or how many times I promised I would be home for dinner and then called at the last minute and David picked up the phone and I said, I'm really sorry, honey, I can't make it. Hundreds, if not thousands of times. How many nights I didn't sleep at home because I was on call all night in the ICU. How many children's events I missed, or even not events, even just having a child sit on my lap to say goodnight and read a book. I missed a lot. And I look back on that with some sadness. It's not, I wouldn't have changed it. I might have changed it if I were to do it over, but I loved what I did. And I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I knew how it was going to turn out. So I guess the lesson, and in hindsight, the message, I guess, is that sometimes in life you only learn by the experience of learning. And I probably wouldn't have figured that out if I hadn't actually done it and looked back. And now I have wisdom. And that's part of getting older. And that's a joy of being my age. So I have no regrets about being almost 70. I love being my age, and I love the wisdom that comes from hindsight that I have developed. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. As you know, I always love hearing your stories. Of course, part of it is just that it's such a fascinating field that I know personally I never could have done. So it's always so interesting for me to hear about that. And you brought up some very good points that I've been thinking about a lot as I think about this subject itself, and the idea that the perhaps most interesting thing about hindsight is the fact that you don't have it when you need it. um, that, as you say, it's a kind of knowledge that then becomes wisdom, which is, if we are to take a comfort from it, that's the comfort we take. If there's any comfort in not knowing where that other path might have led, at least we take comfort in the wisdom we've made along the way. It's been a little over an hour. I know generally this is when we call it quits. So you were speaking of learning a lesson, and I'll just end with a quick lesson I learned today, and I promise this will be very quick. It is also about a past relationship. Not that any of you signed up to hear about Bobby Kennison's relationships tonight, but this, I promise, is a different one, and it's very quick. And really, it's more about the lesson that I learned from it that hopefully will tie this up in a neat little bow. And that lesson is, there was once upon a time I was in a play with a young woman, and she was a lovely and awkward young woman, and I liked her very much for both being awkward and lovely and kind and funny and talented. And we had a sort of mutual crush on each other, but we're both too awkward to really talk about it or to do anything. And the reason I thought of her as I was thinking of this story slam is because often I've heard many people talk about the idea of the one that got away, and that is this kind of hindsight in of itself as well. And I remember there was a moment with this young woman after a cast party when I drove her home, and she was trying to awkwardly flirt with me, and I was trying to awkwardly flirt with her, but neither perhaps had the experience or the wherewithal or bravery to make any sort of genuine move, as they say. And neither of us were too adept at flirting, it seemed. And in any case, I remember for a long time after, because she, of course, went on into her own life and so on, I would think about, oh, what if? That's another thing about hindsight, is the question, what if? What if that night, if I had asked if I could kiss her, or if anything along those lines, could we have been this great couple? And again, so now I come to the point, is that this very day, in fact, I was thinking of her because I thought maybe that would be the opening story instead of this little closing. But then I realized the lesson I learned, hopefully will tie this up in a bow. I looked at her Facebook page, because we've been Facebook friends all this years, but of course we've lost, we don't keep in constant touch. But I was looking at, I just thought, I wonder how she's doing. And I went and I looked, and I knew she was married. But I was there and I saw on her Facebook page all of these pictures of her with her husband and her child, and they were happy. And, I didn't do a deep dive on her Facebook because that might be a little weird, but just a little scroll down, and I saw, they're the type of couple that does like theme costumes, and they seem to just be very goofy and happy and all these smiles and this beautiful family, and they just bought a house, and just this wonderful story, and they genuinely seem like this couple that is so meant to be. Obviously, I know on social media things can lie, but they look really like that happy couple, that fun, happy couple that seems to delight in one another's company. And the lesson I learned from this was the fact, in hindsight, when you think of the one that got away, it made me realize that sometimes what a selfish notion that can be when you think of yourself as, well, this is the one that got away. I wonder if I could be happy. And the lesson I learned is how happy she is in her life. That has nothing to do with me. And so if she had gone in a different path, who knows what her hindsight memory would have been. If we had kissed that night, would she have one day been thinking, I wonder, in hindsight? So that's my little cap of the evening. I want to thank you all for coming today. John or Michelle, if there are any other announcements or anything like that, but if not, we can definitely say good night.
Thank you
That
for
was- that
coming,
was a
everyone.
beautiful
So thank you all.
Wonderful stories. Thanks everybody for sharing.
Good to see you all.
Have a good night.
And seeing everyone.
Bobby, great job.
Bye,
Oh, thank you,
Peter.
Kim.
Yeah, good job.
Right. Peace.
Thanks
Bye,
again,
everybody.
Bruce and Marilee. That was great.
Yeah.
Thank you,
And
Michelle.
marbles.
Yes.
Bye, guys.
Good
Bye-bye.
night.
Take care.
Have a
Thank
good
you
weekend.
all.
everyone.
Night, John.
Night.